One of the recurring problems that people with Asperger syndrome face is being ignored. There's different ways to say this. We could say that you're being snubbed, that you're being ostracized, that you're being shunned. All of these phrases, all of these terms basically describe kind of the same thing, and that is the social setting in which you are in is one in which you are set aside by the others. And sometimes it's just one person who just totally has nothing to do with you because of their perception of you. Now, we're going to ask several questions such as why do they do this, what do we do about it, and so forth. But let's begin with this question, kind of an important question, and that is, well, exactly what is ostracization? When we talk about shunning, when we talk about being snubbed, what exactly are we talking about? And we're talking about this. This is a definition from dictionary.apa, American Psychological Association.org. An extreme form of rejection in which one is excluded and ignored in the presence of others. Ostracism has powerful negative effects on psychological well-being and is detrimental to multiple domains of self-functioning. Now, when I read that, what I'm thinking is this is a form of abuse. And like any form of abuse, it has consequences, such as post-traumatic stress syndrome. But there are no bruises. I mean, when you abuse somebody psychologically, you don't punch them, you don't hit them, there's no cuts, there's no wounds, there's no bruises, there's no black eye, there's no broken hand, there's no, look, this guy punched me. Okay, so you go to, say for example, you go to the authorities and you say, I'm being abused. And the authorities say, well, how are they abusing you? Well, they won't talk to me. They're ignoring me. Now, who is the authority? You go into the cops, you go into your teacher if you're a little kid in classroom and say, nobody will play with me. But they don't see it. They don't see the abuse. However, this is important. Now, effectively what's happening is when this happens to you, you are being abused by the abuser, well, doing nothing. I mean, nothing whatsoever. So we call it invisible bruising. But this comes from psychology, iresearch.net.com, and the quote is this. Now pay attention. The same region of the brain that detects physical pain, the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, is similarly activated during a brief episode of minimal ostracism, in which individuals believe others are not including them in a virtual ball toss game. Now, I actually read about this study, and what they did is they put somebody in, they scanned their brain. I think it was an MRI, as they were playing, playing a game of catch, like you bounce the ball, only it was virtual. There was no real ball. It was on a computer screen. They had hand controls or whatever. And there came a point in time in this game where the player was, they just left him out. They ignored the player. And they were scanning the brain, see what the response would be. And when this person was left out, the effect was the same as if they had physical pain. That's what they're referring to here. Well, the thing about that game, that virtual game that they were playing, pass the ball back and forth, is they actually weren't playing with anybody. They were playing with a pre-programmed computer. But still, they thought they were playing with other people, and they felt the same pain being ostracized as if it were physical pain. So that's why we say this is invisible bruising. And if you are a person with Asperger syndrome, with autism, chances are you have experienced this multiple times, probably all the time. Now, if you go to work, it's almost inevitable. If you go to school, it's almost inevitable. Well, if you go anywhere where there are other people, it's almost inevitable. Now, growing up, I've said this a couple times before in other videos, when I was growing up attending school, I really wasn't physically bullied that much. Most people who have Asperger syndrome, that was a major problem in their life growing up, is being bullied in school. For me, physical bullying was not a problem. The challenge that I had was no social interaction rather whatsoever. I was just ignored. And I got to say, it was by and large me because I didn't know how to interact with others, and so they didn't know what to do with me. They didn't know how to interact with me, and so by and large, they didn't. Now, there was a little bit of bullying, but I got to say that by and large, the other boys in my class probably took more of a physical whooping than I did because, well, that's what boys do. They like to fight. I just wasn't part of anything. I wasn't even part of the fighting. I was just totally ostracized. I was just kind of left out. Were they being mean? Were they being intentionally hurtful? I don't think so. Now, maybe some of them were, but no, I don't think so. But sometimes it is intentional. A lot of times it is intentional. But people are reacting to us as people with Asperger syndrome. And we're going to get to that in just a second when we talk about why this is done. But first of all, let's talk about how it's done. So when people ostracize you, and you could probably tell me as much as I'm telling you, so you may want to do that in the comment section. By the way, when you leave comments, I'm happy to read them if you want to talk to me, but be mindful that other people are reading them too. So when you leave a comment, talk to me, but talk to others as well if you want to. Or talk to both of us at the same time. Doesn't really matter. But how it's done, have you ever had anybody talk about you in front of you knowing you were there listening to them? And you're just feeling, this is rude. I mean, this is, and they don't care. They know it hurts. They're doing it by design. Another thing we find sometimes is we will be sitting with people or talking with people, being in a group of people, and the guy sitting to the right is talking to the person sitting to the left, and you're just kind of in the way. You're left out of the conversation. Is that rude? Yeah, well, maybe. But if you are a person with Asperger syndrome like I am, you really don't have a whole lot to say anyhow. So yeah, I'm not sure that's a form of bullying. They're not including me because I'm not including me. So, where do you draw the line here? Well, let's ask ourselves the question then, why is it that people will ostracize us? I think the primary reason is because of social posturing. This is something that I just don't get. This thing about social posturing, who is on top of the heap socially, who is cool, who is not. I never fully understood that. When I go to school, I just want to go to school. I don't want to socialize. I don't want to be at the top. I don't want to be at the bottom. I don't want to be in the heap anywhere. I'm not there to socialize. I don't mind socializing. I'm okay with it. But as far as posturing is concerned, that part of it, who cares? Who's cool? Who's not? Well, apparently, I don't think the way that most people think because they do it totally differently. And whenever you were around people, again, school, church, workplace, neighborhood, wherever there's a group of people, political gatherings, people like to be the big shot. People like to think that they are a little bit above everyone else. They like to be respected, and sometimes they will try to achieve that by abusing other people through ostracizing them. So it's part of that is just social posturing. Another part is what we alluded to earlier, and that is just reaction. Now, when I was a kid growing up, basically, I lived in a perpetual state of selective mutism. It's not that I didn't want to talk to other people. I didn't know how to talk. I just couldn't do it. And even into my teen years and college age years, same thing. Now, some people I could communicate with fine. I could socialize with them fine. But by and large, most people had to warm up to me. I could talk to people who would come up to me first. And they would initiate the, what would you call it, friendship or just whatever. They would initiate the socializing. But I just had this weird fear of other people. I still do to some degree. Go to work and the same thing. How do you hold down a job when you can't talk to people? I mean, if you don't have selective mutism, you probably don't understand this because you don't have a point of reference. But you just can't talk to some people. You just can't open up unless they draw it out of you. And sometimes it's really difficult for them to do it. So the point is, sometimes people will ostracize those of us with Asperger syndrome because They're just reacting to us. You know, it's kind of like when they ostracize us, they think we're ostracizing them. They're acting aloof to us because they don't understand we're not being aloof. You know, if you have selective mutism, they think you're being arrogant, that you're, you know, just kind of stuck up or whatever. This guy won't talk to me. He won't socialize with me. He doesn't like me, so I just won't like him back and treat him the same way that he treats me. So those are some of the reasons that other people do it. Okay, so what do we do about this? Well, what we need to do is we need to understand that self-blame, that's something that we need to take into consideration. Not that we are doing something wrong, nefarious, but, you know, we are initiating the reaction because we don't know how to socialize. So that puts the blame on us, but it also puts the blame on the other because they're not responding appropriately. But then again, we're not acting appropriately according to the standards of the neurotypical community. So what happens next is then, well, we'll try to cope with it. But I got to tell you, when I've been in the workplace, coping with that is next to impossible because you just cannot open up. You're not capable of doing it. At least I wasn't. It just wasn't possible. I just could not do it. So ultimately, what happens is, at least in my experience, is just flat out resignation. That is to say that I accept this is the way I am, this is the way that other people are, and that leads to avoidance. Now, some people would say avoidance is a bad thing, and often it is because, you know, we are social creatures, even if you have autism. If you're autistic, you're still social, you just don't know how to do it. You still have that need, even though you don't know how to satisfy the need, but it's still there. So what do? Well, if you try to socialize, you're rejected, and that hurts, and then you start the rumination thing, and you think to yourself, you know, if I'd never bothered trying in the first place, I wouldn't be ruminating, I wouldn't have been hurt, I wouldn't have been wounded. It's kind of like, have you ever been in a car wreck? You know, driving down the road, maybe had a little fender bender, and after it's over, you think, you know, if I had waited 5 minutes, I would not have been in that accident. Or if I had taken a different route, I would not have been in that accident. So now you're taking that thinking process and applying it socially. You're thinking, you know, if I hadn't gone to that activity, then I would have not had that encounter that was so harmful. So what I will do is, well, I'm not going to drive anymore, figuratively speaking. I'm just not going to socialize anymore because I know inevitably I'm going to be hurt. I'm not so sure that's a good way to take it, but that is often the outcome. See those two rectangles on the screen? Let's keep talking if you want. Click on one of those two rectangles. Conversation goes on. If not, thanks for stopping by, and see y'all next time.